Act and Potency in Ficino's Platonic Theology. This is a presentation on the work of Marsilio Ficino. It's one of his mature works, his Platonic Theology. I intend to keep this presentation concise as usual, and thus we'll try to stick to a very specific idea which Ficino presents in the work, and that idea is a well-known scholastic concept which is rooted in the philosophy of Aristotle, and that is the notion of act and potency. And so let's get into it. So Ficino has this basic scheme, and it's a hierarchy, and it runs from God at the apex, at the top of the hierarchy, as is common in many sort of theological metaphysical outlooks, and then it descends or emanates from God to the level of angel or angelic mind, then to the level of the rational soul or the human, or alternatively Ficino calls it just soul, then down into quality, and then into body. And you see I've drawn a line here, and that's because according to Ficino, the rational soul is like the mean in this whole scheme, kind of like the crux or the center point, or the thing that sort of holds the above and the below together in a way. And this is connected to the occult doctrine of the microcosm, which was strongly in the mind of Ficino as well as Pico, who says in his oration on the dignity of man, oh what a marvel is man. This is a sort of strong Renaissance humanist vision of what it means to be a human being, placing us in the center of the whole show, as a kind of crux, as a kind of fulcrum around which things turn. This obviously, I mean, this historically was a big deal. The Renaissance and Renaissance humanism brought in a new vision of man, a new vision of humanity, what it means to be human, and so establishes a certain paradigm of humane education and a cultivation of everything human, in contrast perhaps to a certain medieval denigration of and depreciation of the human as a worm in comparison to the Almighty God. There is an elevation of the status of what it means to be human in the Renaissance generally, and here Ficino is one of the great philosophers of the Renaissance, situates the human being at the center of the system. I'm going to focus on two elements of this scheme today, and that is the top element, God, and the bottom element, body, because these poles establish the terms of the entire hierarchy. And in particular, I'm going to focus on the idea that God, as was held, as the scholastics held, is pure act, Actus Purus. And if God is pure act, then God's opposite would be something like what can purely be acted upon, something like this. And so let's get into what Ficino has to say about these things. So he's starting now with body, or matter is another term he uses, which is the bottom level of his hierarchical scheme. So according to Plato, body is made up of matter and of quantity. It is characteristic of matter only to be extended in space and affected by action, and extension and being affected are passive conditions. But quantity is nothing but the extension of matter, or if it is anything else, it is always subject to division, even as it subjects matter to an unending sequence of experiences and has no effect on any other matter than its own. It follows from all this that body in itself does not act, but solely is acted upon. Okay, so I've underlined that last sentence because Ficino's definition of matter is that which does not act, but is solely acted upon. It is purely receptive of act, if you see what I mean. So all power, this is all Ficino, by the way, from the Platonic Theology. So all power of acting must be attributed to an incorporeal nature. So that follows, because if you say in this last sentence, it follows from all this that body in itself does not act, but solely is acted upon, then all power of acting must be incorporeal. Incorporeal means not bodily, basically. Take fire, for instance. Because of its rarity, it comes closer to the nature of spirit than the other elements. Of all the elements, it is the most effective agent, however. In scarcely a moment, it can perform what it takes other bodies a long time to do. With a single spark, if there isn't fuel enough, it will fill the whole world. It is capable too of giving light, which is regarded as incorporeal, and the action of light is instantaneous. If a body becomes a more effective agent, the closer it is to the incorporeal, is it not obvious that the power of acting resides in an incorporeal nature? We can grasp the same point in the following way. What is first in nature, that is God, acts on everything, but is never acted upon. So what is last, that is corporeal matter or body, has to be acted upon by everything. And if in the highest unity, being infinite, there exists an infinite power of acting, then in infinite plurality, there exists no power of acting at all, but rather an infinite capacity for being acted upon. This is the Pythagorean tetractys, the image on the left. a holy image, a holy number for the Pythagoreans. It is also known as the decad, the number of 10 points. And it is a hierarchical image also, with a single point at the top, which I am suggesting is analogous to Ficino's God in this system, and 4 points at the bottom. And the point about this is that a way of understanding the tetractus, the decad, is in geometric terms. The point is a zero-dimensional place, if you want to call it that. Doesn't have dimensions, so maybe place isn't appropriate, but it's a zero-dimensional origin point. The line establishes the first dimension, and so from the 1 we have the 2, and we have literally, if you look at the 2 dots, like a line, or from the first dot to one of the second dots, that's a line. Like, you need 2 points to get a line. The next level down we have the plane, two dimensions, and so now you have like a triangle made from lines, and you have a plane, and then you have 4 dots at the bottom, and now we have established we can establish 3 dimensions. We can establish the line of height, the line of breadth, and the line of depth. And if you look around you, there's the world seems 3-dimensional. It seems to be governed by Euclidean geometry now. I think that technically Euclidean geometry has been surpassed in some areas of space. I need to refresh my memory on this. I think it's something about like how, like, the best way to describe physical reality theoretically. New geometries have emerged in the last few centuries, but bit of a side tangent. Like, the point here is just that space as we experience it is governed according to this kind of emanation, basically, from the point to the line to the plane to volume. See, volume is just like the space literally like taken up by something. So if I look around me, I've got this book, and you know, it has its height, it has its length and breadth. It has its like depth, its length, its breadth. It has its 3 dimensions, which give it its volume, which I could like measure. You see what I'm saying? And so what Ficino was saying at the beginning about body is that quantity is just the extension of it. So if I wanted to print another book, it would like replicate the body and increase the volume of the volume. Like, a book's called a volume, but anyway, like, you get the point. Like, this is occupying a volume, and then if I wanted to extend the body, I would increase the amount of volume it's taking up, basically. You can see this too, like, just in basic notions, like bodybuilding is about building mass, like muscle mass, but like increasing like the actual volume of our bodies, like quite literally. Well, this just gets into notions of quantity, right? Like, quantity is the extension of body, basically. And so there's many different ways that can manifest with the accumulation of money, for example, is another like extension of body. Like eating is extending our bodies. Yeah, I won't go too much into this, but you get the point. Here is basically that like the Tetractus or the Decad gives us an analogy for Ficino's system, and this is no coincidence because Platonism, of which Ficino is a erudite defender, is rooted in Pythagorean intuitions. Like indeed, it was said that over the gates of the old academy of Plato, which was established in Athens, was written like let none ignorant of geometry enter into here. The sacred groves of the academy were closed to those ignorant of geometry. Like the knowledge of geometry was the key to the sacred groves of the academy, put it this way. And so taking a geometric image like this, and letting and exploring the intuitions associated with it, what it might tell us about the way reality is precisely what Ficino's up to in his system, you know, of God and angel and rational soul and quality and body. It's there are geometric ideas at work there, basically, is my point. So I commented a bit on the bottom level, body, volume D, 3D, like what it means to extend body, grow mass, get big. But the opposite, like the point is bodiless, basically. It's incorporeal. The point is like this really simple and elegant image of the incorporeal, you know, just like fire, because it like can spread through the whole Tetractus, the whole Decad, the whole of reality in an instant, because, you know, like nobody is anything without the point. You see, like the point is the point of origin. It is the arche and the telos, like the beginning and the end. It's also simple. It's also indivisible. It's also one and unified and unifying. The point is, again, the transcendent principle. We encounter it again. It is a transcendent principle because it's like well, it's dimensionless, bodiless, and yet it's the source and origin of all body. I had this other slide on here just to think about this idea a bit more. Let me see if I can move my thing. Hopefully that works okay. Yeah, so like we just basically have God as Actus Purus, pure act, and matter as pure potency. And to my best understanding, our contemporary physics, our contemporary theoretical physics, which has interrogated matter to the greatest extent in the whole of human history, lands somewhere like the idea of matter as pure potency. It's sort of unclear, like, so, you know, we used to think that like matter was atoms, like atomic theory, particle physics, and like particles do exist, like atoms do exist. but like theoretical physics is saying like beneath atoms there are like quantum fields which govern the atoms, the particles, at a more fundamental level, and that these fields are indeterminate, meaning they, depending on observation, they can act like a particle or act like a wave. My specialism is not theoretical physics, so please correct me if I misspoke about any of that in the comments below. But that's my understanding of quantum, the idea of quantum fields. And it looks quite a lot like potency, because, you know, what makes it a particle or a wave? Now, particles and waves, now you're getting into something like what Ficino means by quality, which is his next step up from body, because they're different forms that can be taken by matter. And for matter to be informed to be a particle or a wave is already a collapsing of the potency into an actuality. And then for an atom to then be informed into like a cell, and a cell into an organ, and an organ into an organism, and for that to be like me talking to you right now is like a series of acts, a series of forms, forming matter, forming this, I don't know if stuff is even really the right word, but this infinite capacity to be acted upon is acted upon by pure act at the top level, whereas like God, and then like through that the hierarchy is established by like degrees of gradation of those acts. Oh yeah, like, and the really interesting thing about all this thought that just flashed across my head from earlier, what we just said. Let me see if I can get up what Ficino. Oh, got the matter going there. Let me just go back to Ficino, something he said. Yeah, I thought this was really interesting, right? So like, if a body becomes a more effective agent, the closer it is to the incorporeal, is it not obvious that the power of acting resides in an incorporeal nature? This gets into like all really interesting stuff, like positive psychology. Abraham Maslow, his hierarchy of needs is a famous 20th century psychological model, and at the apex of that hierarchy he put self-actualization, because the actualization of potential is like the greatest human motivation and need for Maslow. But it's not like just his idea, because like the idea of human virtue, the cultivation of human perfection, theosis, divinization, coming closer to God, being imaging God more fully, etc. All of these ideas are connected to act. Is kind of, that's the main theme I wanted to kind of draw out of Ficino in this presentation, because it's kind of saying like our essential humanity is not like pure body, like to be acted upon in an infinite capacity. It is to act and to actualize according to reality, like according to God, like in an analogous way to God, perhaps, or participating in the free act of God, the eternal act of God. And, what might that mean? That's a bit abstract. Or like, just like a lot of this stuff is common sense in our language, in the way we sort of, because a lot of these ideas have come into our culture and come into the way we understand the world. But like, like acting is like making some concrete decision, doing something concrete, or even, and that doing something concrete in a bodily way is preceded by the thought act of the intention to pursue some virtue or pursue some end. And this capacity to act is very central to our humanity. And through action, through these acts, we more fully sort of realize and actualize our nature, our potential. Because it is like a godly capacity to act. Yeah. So I wanted to keep this one concise, as usual. But there was a key idea, and that's the idea of God as Actus Purus and matter as pure potentiality in the Platonic theology of Marsilio Ficino, and how this basic polarity informs his metaphysical outlook, and how the idea of act relates to our lives as human beings in a very immediate way, and that sort of the basis for virtue is to take on board that idea of acting in a proactive, positive, and intentional way towards certain virtuous ends and visions and ideals, as opposed to being pure body, being purely acted upon, because that's not what we are as rational souls, most essentially, for Ficino. Would love to hear any comments, any criticism, any feedback in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the presentation, I'd love for you to give the video a like, and if you'd like to hear more content, then you can subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, you can support via the Patreon link on the channel. Thanks for listening. More content coming up soon. Thanks.